The book of the prophet Jeremiah. Jeremiah was an Israelite. He lived in Jerusalem in the final decade in the finest Judah. He would warn Judah about the consequences, the breaking the covenant, the idolatry, injustice. He even predicted the empire of Babylon would come and God would bring the judgment to Israel, destroying Jerusalem, taking the people to exile, and sadly became reality. And Jeremiah lived through the siege and destruction of Jerusalem and witnessed the exile. And this book became existence in an interesting way, making chapter 36, how Jeremiah is preaching of his 20 years, sermons, poems, essays, and poems and writings, and rebuke that were wrote in it, and the scrolls, and God allowed the stories about Jeremiah, and it preaches together. This book reads as a collection, all arranged, the prophets, a message of God's justice and God's grace. The book calls into Jeremiah, that's a book of Jeremiah, calling of God's Israel to all the nations as a prophet, to uproot, to tear down, and to plant and to build up. And God has accused Israel about God's judgment and the message of hope. This whole is a perfect summary, a large section, 1 to 24, a collection of his exile. And Israel has broken the covenant of God and violated the terms and agreement they made of the Torah in many ways. They adopted the worship of many Canaanite gods and made idol shrines all over the land. And Jeremiah, idolatry as adultery. And uses the language of prostitution and obscurity and faithfulness, and describes it as Israel and to all the other gods. And Jeremiah accuses Israel leaders, the priests, the kings, the prophets. They all become corrupt and they all abandon the Torah, and led to a tragic result: rampant social injustice. The vulnerable, the widow, the orphan, the immigrants, they all taken advantage of in clear violation of the law of the Torah. And the Israel leaders didn't seem to care. And all these ideals come together in chapter 7, Jeremiah's temple sermon. They come to worship their God in the temple, and it's like everything is fine. And outside the temple, they're worshiping other gods, even adopting the horrifying Canaanites, a child sacrifice. And Jeremiah makes unpopular God of Israel what the coming is going to destroy all the old temples, and they're sending enemies from the north. An army will allow to conquer Jerusalem. They're talking about the great empire of Babylon. And this all leads to transition, chapter 25. It says, turn back to God. And the first back, and they say, the king, Jeremiah announced, Israel and his Israelites, neighbors, turn to Israel and its neighbors for 70 years, and a cup of wine filled to the brim. It's God's justice, anger, and idolatry, and God will make Israel drink from this cup. It's the key to the book, the design. Let's focus on Babylon, first on Israel, in chapter 26 to 45, and the other nations, 46 to 51. The section of Israel contains how Jeremiah begged the Israelites to turn back, but the leader of Israel kept rejecting Jeremiah. And it's huge, and under siege and destroyed by Babylon, and how Jeremiah was prosecuted all that time and kidnapped and taken against his will to Egypt, a group of Israelites. In the middle, that is dark stories, disaster and judgment. It's a collection of Jeremiah, hope for Israel, the future. And the pictures us on Moses' prediction. After the exile, God would renew the covenant. And God will not abandon his people. He will renew his covenant and transform their Israel's hearts. Jeremiah had this plan, and I will place a Torah, not on tablets, but the heart of his own people. He will heal their rebellion. They can follow from their sinful ways, and they will turn to to the land, to the Messiah, to come. And that's what all nations will acknowledge Israel God as the true God. These chapters are showing even as a prophecy, it's not the final word, but the faithfulness, the fullness, no matter what. Paradigmatic poems, how God will use God's Babylon around Israel and Egypt and Philistia, Moab, Edom, Moab, and Muscus. And surprisingly, the longest poems will give a rest. God will judgment on Babylon itself. God will use exile and injustice, and they don't endure his justice, his violence. Well, God will do justice, and Jeremiah will say there will be justice against Babylon too. The images of Babylon. Genesis chapter 11. Babylon has become the architecture of the rebellions of nations. Will give this nation to over. This in 52, the story of the Second Kings, how Babylon final attack on Jerusalem, how it restored its dirty walls, made the people in exile, and the story shows the warning of judgment, chapter 1, how this is fulfilled. The chapter ends, a short story, how the captive Israel, Holikin, the heirline of David, or the king of Babylon, lived through prison, and at the royal temple in the rest of his life, and as the book ends. It's a glimmer of hope, and Jeremiah's promise in chapter 30 to 33. God hasn't abandoned his people, and even David's line. And a huge amount of warnings and judgment. The final words conclude of hope, the future. And that's what the book of Jeremiah is all about.